Forney, are you there?
I am, yes.
Hi, Matthew. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. I've had a couple of beers. I'm on my third. I'm getting a little sloshed. Doing work. It's 1:45 here. I'm doing all right.
All right. I just want to welcome you to the official TekWars podcast. This is all about TekWars. This is the TekWars fandom, and we're doing our first podcast with Matthew Forney. So, Matt, I know that you're a big TekWars fan.
Yes.
What book in the TekWars series is your favorite?
Well, I really like the first one just because, I'm kind of a hipster that way, The first of everything is always just best to me, First Star Wars, first Star Trek movie, first poem by Byron.
Okay, you like the first Star Trek movie more than any of the others?
I just like the visuals, It's very visually pleasing. Now, the plot is terrible, but if you just turn the audio off, it's really great to look at, and it holds up even to this day, the visual effects, even in an age of CGI.
The motion picture, and not the first J.J. Abrams one.
No, that movie's that movie gives me a coma, so I can't. I've never been able to sit through it. Just the lens flare everywhere, and the characters screaming at each other and acting like homosexual catamites.
I saw the first one when it came out in theaters. And they just got a lot worse progressively as they went along. Like, the second one, I think, is the worst of all the Star Trek movies.
The second, Into Darkness?
Yeah, Into Darkness.
I've not seen that. Like I said, I've never been able to sit through the entire first J.J. Abrams one. Because, again, modern moviegoers seem to interpret, masculinity as, screaming loudly. There's no character development. If you compare the J.J. Abrams movies to the original Star Trek movies, there's a lot more subtlety in the acting. In the Wrath of Khan and Captain Kirk never actually meet each other in person on screen. It's always the actors were acting to green screens or whatever. But there's tension, there's dramatic energy. You can feel the genuine conflict. But in the new movies, everyone's just screaming at each other constantly. And it's not just Star Trek. You see that I saw Guardians of the Galaxy 5 years ago when that came out, because everyone was like, go see Guardians of the Galaxy. And if you don't like Marvel movies, you'll like this one. And I'm like, it's got everything I hate about modern movies. There's CGI everywhere. It all looks fake. Characters scream at each other in lieu of having any sort of character development, because modern moviegoers are just so dumb that they can't sit still. They gotta have an explosion or someone yelling. Their idea of a strong female character is someone who just screams all the time. It's unbearable.
What I notice about these movies whenever I watch them is I feel like they're very poorly edited, so that they write the script and then they have all the character beats in the movie, and then they get into the editing room and they're like, we need the 45-minute action sequence at the end. And so they cut out as many of the other beats that they can from all the character arcs. And then, it almost feels like the actual story isn't even there anymore. It's just completely superficial.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the movie is done. The plot is not the focus. The focus is the special effects, what they can get out for toys and merchandise and stuff, and not whatever. David Lynch's Dune got ridiculed, rightly so, for that approach. Which, to be fair, wasn't Lynch's fault. It was chopped up after he delivered his final cut. But it seems like all modern movies just follow that course in general. They just hack out the plot and try to make it, there's shiny thing, there's explosion, there's shiny thing, there's characters yelling at each other, so that's drama and it's action. There's more shiny thing. There's so much action going on. Plus, the weird editing with regards to just the cut everywhere. I remember seeing Quantum of Solace, the second Daniel Craig James Bond movie back in 2008, and I could not follow the editing for the life of me, because it just seemed like every scene was cut just 3 seconds too short. So you've got this constant disorienting feeling where you can't really follow anything because it's just so fast. And it seems like every movie just does that as a matter of course now. like
Let me
action
ask you
movies
this,
at least.
Matt. Have you seen Star Trek Discovery?
I have not. Like I said, the first one, I can't sit through it. It's just so unbearable to my senses.
So I mean, this is relevant because this week they uh, launched a lot of information about the next Star Trek shows, like the Patrick Stewart one.
Wait. There's a Patrick Stewart. He's coming back?
Yeah, he's gonna come back as Captain Picard in a new show,
He's
and
like in his 80s, isn't he?
yeah, and now I think the deal is that he's supposed to be like retired or something from Starfleet. Um, but that they just announced a lot of information about that this week. But they have this guy, Alex Kurtzman,
Mm-hmm.
who they've actually they put him totally in charge of the Star Trek universe. So he's developing all these new shows right now. There's going to be like one on Nickelodeon that's like animated for kids. So they're making all this crap. So I think that the deal with the new Picard series is going to be pretty disappointing when it actually comes out.
Oh, God, geriatric Captain Picard running around just, giving global peace with his goddamn walking stick. That's just sad. I mean, they had a little bit there at the end with all good things, but that was like hypothetical, and it was only 1/3 of that episode. Like, who wants to see just like some old dude just walking around with his cane on the bridge of the Enterprise, just like, you kids better behave and get off my lawn, goddammit.
That's going to be really weird because I think in the casting calls for the show, that's like all of the crew is a bunch of like criminals and stuff. So I think the premise of the show is he has like a band of like pirates or something that he's in charge of.
So he's basically playing galactic corrections officer. That's just weird, man.
I don't understand why they can't ever make any of these franchises good anymore. There's been going on, and this is like the big thing. Is like I know Doctor Who had this problem recently. I don't watch Doctor Who. I don't know anything about it besides
With the female Who.
Yeah.
This is Warren Nokashima, by the way, Matt. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Well, from my observation,
And when people are saying
looks
it's all about the women, the fans reacting against the women because they're misogynists and stuff. That's what they said about like Star Trek Discovery and The Last Jedi and Doctor Who. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to bring that up with The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens. I've seen both of those movies. I actually wrote reviews of them for websites when they came out. With both of those movies, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, you have people who can see Star Wars, like they see the visual action elements, lightsabers, fighting, dogfights, etc. They can grasp that, but they can't grasp the fundamentals. The original Star Wars, George Lucas based that off of a combination of old action serials from the 40s, World War II dogfights. He later tried to claim that he based it in part off of the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell's The Hero of a Thousand Faces. I'm not sure how much that holds up the scrutiny, but the point is there was a sort of like an inner core to it that these movies just totally lack. To the extent that, in many ways, they're kind of just like high-budget fan fiction. Like, the Force Awakens was basically just a high-budget fan fiction remake of the original Star Wars. Like, right down to frame for frame, when they're going to blow up a massive space station, the trench run, everything. And then, The Last Jedi was all over the place, mashing together both, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. You have directors who... If you assume that they're not hostile to the original source material, they just fundamentally can't understand it. It's like the original James Bond, movies, books. Ian Fleming was an actual spy who worked in the intelligence service during World War II, so he knew a thing or two about espionage. Which is more interesting is likely to be more interesting. Spy novel or spy movie made by someone who is actually worked as a spy, or someone who's just read a lot of spy novels. Most people are going to go with the former because it's that experience, that verisimilitude that makes for entertaining fiction. But someone like Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams, they've lived their entire lives on the screen. They don't have the access to they don't have any knowledge of the inner material that people like George Lucas were working with. They can ape the surface elements of this franchise, but they can't get to the inner core, and that's why these movies just come off as so unfulfilling.
So two things. I mean, first of all, I don't get the James Bond stuff. I mean, there's controversy over how they're going to be casting James Bond, but I've never liked that franchise because, Ian Fleming in real life, he's the sort of guy who was in like Switzerland somewhere during World War II and who just killed hookers and, you know, made room deals with the Nazis. And that's why they were all there in Switzerland. That's where the OSS and everyone operated, is so that they could like make deals for all the gold in Europe and get that into London and New York. And all those original spy type guys, I mean, they're not like cool guys. They're all like corporate lawyers was who they were recruiting. So I've never liked the James Bond sort of stuff.
Austin Powers was pretty cool. It's a pretty cool spy.
Yeah, that was funny. I'm not a gigantic fan of James Bond either, but I can understand why people like it.
So, but the thing about Star Wars, though, is that I think one of the big influences with these books called Lensman. I don't know. Do you know those?
I've heard of it, yes.
It's like an old pulp science fiction space opera series of novels by this guy, Doc Smith, E. Doc Smith. And the thing in those books is that there's something controlling, like there's the Force in Star Wars, and there's a similar thing in Lensman where people have these psychic powers, and then that kind of force has its creators and controllers who are like these beings who existed from the beginning of time, and they're like running a eugenics program through like the whole galaxy in order to breed up these like psychic supermen who will be able to fight off an alien invasion from another dimension like a million years in the future. And I think that's the thing that was missing from the Star Wars sequels. Because if you look at George Lucas, he made a comment somewhere about like how the sequels were originally supposed to be about the Wills or something.
Yeah.
And I think that was the same thing, as that they were going to originally go there and meet the weird little creatures who are really behind it all, and then they would have an explanation. Because you have a trilogy of trilogies, and it's like the sequel trilogy doesn't continue the story in like a way that it would have naturally gone in like books like Dune or Lensman or something.
Yeah, it doesn't explain the mechanics behind the Force. The closest thing that did, I mean, I don't know if you're too familiar with like the Star Wars video games, but there was a game back in 2004 called Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords. The original Knights of the Old Republic was by BioWare. It was a kind of just an RPG, sort of a remake of like the original Star Wars, but it was different setting but similar plot points. It was pretty good. But the Sith Lords kind of examine the nature of the Force itself, because you have a villain in that game who's trying to kill the Force, as it were, because she sees like the light side, the dark side, and how like the Force kind of, she views the Force as manipulating people as to murder each other in pointless wars. And it actually raises some pretty good questions about the mechanics of the Star Wars universe, in the same way that Deep Space Nine raised questions about the mechanics of the Star Trek universe. You've got this magical thing called the Force, but like half the people who learn how to use it become evil, murderous psychopaths. It's kind of like a twist on the idea, the kind of atheist idea that if God exists, he's a massive asshole because he allows evil to happen. It's an interesting perspective on it. A true sequel trilogy would have kind of tackled those questions, fundamental questions of the Star Wars universe, like presuppositions, but it doesn't. It just kind of recycles. What's good about the new Star Wars movies that is not original, and what's original is not good.
It feels like they're just recycling from, the Star Wars trilogy itself. And when George Lucas originally made the movies, it was stuff like, clearly he read Dune and Lensman, and he was familiar with some different science fiction novels and things. So he sort of made his own idealized version of like what all those books were about. He read them all, and then he sort of made a picture in his mind of like an idealized form of that kind of story, and then he generated all the elements out of that uniquely. But now I feel like the people making the sequel trilogy and J.J. Abrams and stuff is that all they've seen is just Star Wars. So they're just doing the same thing, but with a very limited pool of just like 3 movies, without understanding kind of the original like aesthetic impetus of what those movies were.
Yeah, it's like I said, they get the surface elements, but they don't understand what's underneath it. The ultimate modern example of that kind of director would be Quentin Tarantino, who is talented. I enjoyed Pulp Fiction, some of his earlier movies, but Quentin Tarantino is dyslexic. He doesn't read a whole lot because of that. His formative years were defined by him working at a video rental store and watching a lot of really bad, B movies and obscure foreign movies. That's what kind of defines his oeuvre. He's got this nice, he's good with the camera angles. He's good at presenting interesting scenarios, but there's just no there. This is particularly evident with his later movies because he's kind of run out of his bag of tricks. Something like Inglourious Bastards or Django Unchained. You've got good camera direction, you've got great angles, you've got nice visuals, but in terms of the core, there's no soul, as it were. It's just a lot of slickness.
That's exactly what I felt about Django Unchained, and I think that's what a lot of people missed when they criticized the movie, because they focused on the racial issue of it, but it was really his most slavish, uncreative movie that he made.
Yeah, basically, Steve Saylor, I think, was the one who first theorized this, but basically, Tarantino just wants to make movies with a lot of gore and a lot of violence. Kill Bill is the ultimate example of that in his repertoire. It's just a movie about. It's just a glossy series of fight scenes with a threadbare plot. But with Django Unchained, he basically made the same type of movie, but he put a sort of social justice-y message on top of it to make it seem more acceptable. Same thing with Inglourious Bastards,
Because if you read if you see his interviews or anything, he often talks about how he likes what he calls intertextual film criticism. I've actually heard him say that he's going to make his movies and then he's going to retire and then he's going to write intertextual film criticism books. So, but he always talks about that, and he means the feminist film theory, race film theory, that sort of thing. So when he made Django Unchained, it's he made a movie that was perfectly aligned with the ideal structure of that kind of criticism. This is the movie that sort of criticism says needs to be made, or follows all the rules of that. So you have a director who's based himself around quote unquote breaking all the rules, and then he made this perfect movie. And there's actually the point in the movie where he's in the movie and Django shoots him and he blows up. It's very specifically that's the sort of thing that criticism focuses on. We're gonna shoot. The black male character has to have his agency returned, he has to be active. So he had to really put that scene in there so that the narrator of the story is destroyed, and that Django has his ultimate moment of getting his agency back. And the movie was so slavish because of that, because I felt like it was following that formula very closely.
Yeah, it's very much that's his whole thing. It's kind of this postmodern schlock, which is amusing because a lot of his imitators see just the violence and stuff, and they try to imitate that, and they completely miss. I don't want to say core, because I said, his movies have no real core. They miss the ethos of what he's doing. To compare, for example, the Boondock Saints. That's a famous Tarantino ripoff movie that got famous on DVD. The Boondock Saints is terrible.
I've never seen it, but I've heard people say it's really bad.
It's not good. Basically, I said, Tarantino is he's a postmodern, college educated kind of and while he's not well read, he's got the fundamentals of filmmaking down and stuff. Whereas the Boondock Saints was directed by this Irish dude from Boston who got basically lucked into a deal with Miramax, because this was during the indie movie boom of the '90s, and all the studios were kind of trying to spread money around to find new hits. And all he saw in Tarantino's movies was the ultra violence. So he just made a movie that was Tarantino themed, but it was just violence, and it's very clunky and inartful. The documentary about the making of that movie, called Overnight, that's more interesting than the actual movie, because it shows this dude, this Troy Duffy, I believe his name is. He's from Boston. He gets plucked up into L.A. The Harvey Weinstein, picks up options to Boondock Saints. He offers to, get a record deal for Duffy's band. He's gonna buy the bar where Duffy tends bar, and then Duffy thinks he's the next. He thinks he's the next Orson Welles, so he lets all this go to his head. He starts acting like an absolute asshole. He really shits on Kenneth Branagh in one scene because and whatnot, because he's rehearsing, trying to get actors for the movie. And then, eventually Weinstein is like, I've had enough, stops returning his calls, the movie's put into turnaround, and Duffy just sees his whole life just, all his fame just go like that. It's a really, really fascinating study into what happens when you hand up someone like that a lot of power, very quickly. It goes right to their head.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you ever heard of a movie called Heaven's Gate?
Yes. Michael Cimino.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
I was in a cult called Heaven's Gate, actually.
No. It's a really interesting movie, actually, from the 70s. It's a movie that bankrupted United Artists.
What's it about?
It's kind of a Western, but it's more about Polish people on the frontier, dealing with ranchers or landowners.
Yeah, it's about a war between that occurred in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure how fictional or accurate it was. A war between recent European immigrants and big money ranchers and stuff. But the movie was famous for how over budget it went and just how self-indulgent Cimino was. There's one part where he delayed filming because he wanted a certain cloud that he liked to roll into the frame. And that was the second movie he ever did. The first movie.
What's weird though is that that's the only kind of filmmaking I really respect, is because that's what Kurosawa did, and they talk about him making his crew build a whole house in the background of some shot, or changing the roof or something so that it was just a different color.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it, and to be perfectly honest, Heaven's Gate really isn't that bad of a movie.
I know,
it's got a bad
it.
reputation.
I like it.
It's not bad.
It's like Dune. It's a good movie, and people underrate it.
Well, I think Dune is very great visually, but the final cut though, and again, that's not David Lynch's fault. The main issue of Heaven's Gate was just that it was so self-indulgent that it killed the studio and killed Cimino's career. If I recall correctly, he actually got hired to do, I think it was either Flashdance or Footloose after that. But because his demands were so big, they just fired him from the project almost immediately. There's I do like that style of filmmaking, but there's a limit to how much you can do that from a career perspective. Another good movie in that vein would be Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. Have you seen that?
I did see that when it was in theaters.
It was a great visual movie. I like that movie, but
I don't remember a lot
it went
about
way
it.
over budget.
I remember
and the guy who's done it has not done anything since.
I feel we're almost back to the old timey studio system now with the way Disney is controlling everything.
Yeah, we basically have, but without any of the good sides of the studio system. It's I forget who first pointed this out. Well, a bunch of people pointed it out. The middle market film industry has totally been wiped out. There's two classes of film now. You've got the big multi-million-dollar blockbusters, the Marvel movies, high concept action movies, stuff that's millions of dollars are thrown into it, and then you get millions of dollars in returns, and then you get small independent movies, and there's nothing in between. We mentioned Dune, David Lynch. David Lynch is a perfect example of the mid-market movie director. His movies are bigger than independent movies. They require more of a budget, but they're not as big. They're not Avengers level. They're not Marvel level. But he can't get any work. I mean, the Twin Peaks remake was the first major significant thing he'd done in over a decade. The last movie he'd done before that was, if anything, was Inland Empire back in 2006. Because there's no real. The economy of Hollywood doesn't really support those types of movies anymore. You either have to go big with an Avengers or Marvel type movie or DC Cinematic Universe type movie, or you have to be some small, dinky, independent operation on a shoestring budget.
Because if you look at the numbers, even a movie like Avatar actually sold fewer tickets than E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark, all those movies. They're in a position where they've decided that they have to just go bigger and bigger, $300 million budget, $400 million budget, and make it all back on one movie.
I watched this
Actually,
this video about how CGI seems to be getting more and more fake, and it kind of reminds me of what you guys are talking about with the advance to full CGI movies. Like he was talking about Black Panther and how the final fight scene is completely CG, computer generated, versus fight scenes earlier on in the movie that were filmed with actual people and had gravity to it, and you could see it was more of a film rather than these billion-dollar blockbuster Marvel character universe shitstorms that don't have any realism to it. Practical effects have gone away, and that is something that is totally underrated in terms of where the direction of cinema is going.
Do you think that they actually make the CGI worse for China?
I think
I think that the Chinese would like that more for the CGI to
like the polished rubbery.
Yeah, they want it to look like CGI. They don't want the
True.
photorealistic CGI, and that's what it's all about over there. Is that it's all plagiarism, it's all copying, it's all exam cheating, it's all knockoffs, ripoffs. So it's almost like I can see why the Chinese would prefer it to not look real.
That's a genuinely depressing thought. But yeah, it's like CGI. I mean, CGI is a good technology used sparingly. But the problem is all the new movies just have that plastered all over the screen. Like I talked about Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes.
It's just massive CGI battles that look fake. They have no real consequences to them. In movies and fiction of the past, when someone died or someone was killed, that carried real dramatic weight. Okay, but with CG, hell, even going back to the Star Wars prequels, you mow down robots, you mow down enemy soldiers, none of them are real. It's like a video game. Death has no real dramatic weight in these movies. And in terms of visuals, the eye can tell, even with realistic CGI, the eye can tell fakeness because CGI has not managed to kind of climb out of that uncanny valley. The most influential sci-fi movie of the past few decades, the one that everyone is still imitating to this day, would be Blade Runner. And Blade Runner that was before CGI. Everything you see in Blade Runner is a practical effect. The big shots of the futuristic LA at the beginning, was all done with miniatures. All the action scenes, everything was filmed with real actors in real settings. In fact, when they went to did the final cut back in the aughts, they actually went and refilmed one of the action sequences because the original negatives had technical errors in them. And as a result, Blade Runner has that unique, real feel to it, compared to, the Star Wars prequels, like the scene in Episode 1 where What's-Her-Face is addressing the Senate. The Senate is just computer generated. Everything in those movies was done against a green screen. And the eye can tell, both because everything's so glossy and unrealistic looking, and because the actors have very limited range of movement. Because again, they're not interacting with real actors, they're not interacting with real characters, they're not in a real setting. They're against a green screen.
So what do we do about this problem? I mean, do we have to go back and make more movies every year and stop releasing so many, or stop releasing so many huge budget movies and break it all down and only have medium-sized budget movies? Because I feel that's kind of the direction that Netflix wants to take it, where they have their independent movies that they finance, and that they're counting on kind of the theater system distribution to break down.
I think some kind of crash would be necessary to kind of reset things. You compared it to the old studio system. I think a better comparison would be to the tail end of the original Hollywood era in the 50s and 1960s, because the Paramount decision in 1948 kind of sort of slowly killed the old studio system because it banned vertical integration. You no longer had these movie companies, film studios allowed to own their own theaters and whatnot. And that was when television was introduced in a big way, which took a huge bite out of movies' market share. So you had all these high budget, high concept movies like Cleopatra, the Ten Commandments, How the West Was Won, that were very self-indulgent and not very appealing to the general audience. What happened then was that the new Hollywood era came in the mid-'60s, which revitalized Hollywood because you had a new crop of film directors who had a new perspective on things. And they helped save Hollywood from utter devastation. We're kind of at a similar stage now where, like, the existing people running Hollywood, the existing people running the film industry, they have no idea what they're doing. They're throwing all their money into these high budget spectacles that absolutely have to succeed. And then what happens when they don't? You know, like the Blade Runner sequel, Blade Runner 2049, is a perfect example. I love that movie when it came out. I thought it was very well put together, but it's not aging very well. I actually watched it a few months ago because I was going to do a review for my website, Terra House, and it's a good movie on a technical level, but it does not inspire the same sort of feelings that the original one does. You can see the CGI. You can see, like, the dated cinematography. It's getting dated very fast. The acting is not as good or memorable. The writing is not as good as memorable as the original one. And the audience kind of responds to that. You know, it was a box office bomb. It has not been picked up and embraced on DVD. It's not been embraced in the home rental market. We're going to start seeing more of that as the years go on. Particularly with, like, all these superhero movies. Like, again, the only one I've been able to sit through the entire way was of the recent crop of superhero movies was Wonder Woman. I thought that was okay. But again, you see all the super glossy CGI, and the characters themselves look fake. You know, you got, you know, Batman, you know, the Captain America. They're all wearing these overly glossy and unrealistic looking costumes. This era is going to burn itself out before long.
What's interesting is that Steven Spielberg has said that. He has made the prediction that Hollywood is going to completely collapse the way that it's going.
Well, they're basically, yeah. I mean, you know, you have studios that are putting all of their money on, like, 2 or 3 big blockbusters, and that's supposed to carry them. Well, you know, that's always a bad proposition in business because, like, if just one property fails, then you're big in the hole. Like, I've been watching recently a series that Amazon put out a couple years ago called The Last Tycoon. It's based off of F. Scott Fitzgerald's unfinished novel about you know, the early days of Hollywood. And part of the plot involves the film studio that the main character works for, Brady American Pictures, going through serious financial troubles because, like, it's trying to make certain movies work, and then they bomb, and then they're in the hole. You know, Hollywood is in a similar position right now. A lot of studios are in the position right now, especially with the internet and just so much entertainment being available, like, readily. I haven't been to a movie theater, I think, in over a year. Well, that's in part because I'm in a country where English language screenings of movies are hard to come by, but there's a ton of entertainment online that you can get. There's a ton of, like, you know, with Netflix and stuff, you can get access to, you know, old movies and whatnot. You've got these new original series that they're doing. Competition is very, very high right now, and all it takes is a little push, and Hollywood will go right over the edge.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they're getting more desperate to sort of expand the market with their ploys with China, and also I think that the political aspects of the films, of, like, we're casting the female superheroes and stuff. I mean, that's also part of it, is that they're trying to, like, blow up the bubble as much as they can to try to get an audience that, you know, already sees movies or is not really there, but they're making all these desperate ploys to get as much of the market as they can, and there's, like, not really a lot of room for them to go anymore.
Yeah, plus, like, when you water down a movie for, like, a consumption for as many different demographics as possible, you take a lot of out of it. Like what you were saying earlier with the CGI and how the fake CGI kind of appeals to the Chinese audience. You can make a movie that appeals to, like, all age groups, but it's very, very difficult. This was talked about in Red Letter Media's famous reviews of the Star Wars prequels, with regards to, you can't have over-the-top elements like Jar Jar Binks or super kiddie stuff for, like, moderate-age kids, teenagers and stuff. you can't have extreme elements like that in a movie and expect it to work. It's just, you're gonna have this, jarring feeling from point A to point B to point C. Similarly, when you're trying to make a movie that is trying to appeal to the widest possible demographic, it's very difficult to do that, particularly when you've got like large sections of the human population that have totally different value systems, want totally different things out of movies, and just don't view things the same way.
So let me pitch you, for our science fiction television series, here's my idea, is that we're going to have an episode where Hollywood only produces one movie collectively every 100 years, and it's gotten to that point where it's completely densified down, and then every 100 years you get the movie, and it has to sustain the whole world for another 100 years. Do you think that would work? Could I pitch that to you as the Terra House editor? Do you think that's a good idea?
We could throw it on the blockchain.
Well, it would certainly make my job as a reviewer a lot easier. I'd have a lot less content to look at. But
no. I'm going to pitch you this story. I want you to publish it in Terra House. What do you think? We're going to write a science fiction story about this.
Oh, it sounds great. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear about that.
Now we got some real ideas to work with here, because I want to remind everyone that this is the official TekWars podcast, and we're covering also Sliders, Star Trek. Sliders especially, Stargate-related content, things like that. So we need to focus on the science fiction, and we're gonna revolutionize it with some new story ideas to get the industry back on track.
Definitely sounds good to me.
So maybe you should talk a little bit about Terra House. You can kind of plug your stuff here.
No problem, guys. Terra House magazine is a website, literary journal. We publish fiction, poetry, literary nonfiction, reviews of stuff every so often, and we put out content every day. And I'm really humbled by just how it's been embraced by everyone. We just recently had our 1-year anniversary. Traffic is very high, higher to the point where it could probably claim to be the most read literary journal in the world, or at least one of the most read. The idea came to me back in 2017. I was more or less offline then, but I was an avid fan of Fluland and just kind of observing the literary renaissance that's been going on in this part of the internet.
Did you read Trend Warriors?
Yes, I did.
What did you think of Trend Warriors?
Oh, that was really good. That was fantastic.
Oh yeah, now we're talking.
Yeah. But I really admired the fact that there was an audience for literary writing, because my assumption when I got doing this 10 years ago was that I'd have to do political or journalistic type stuff for my entire life, and then the literary stuff would be secondary. But Fluland proved that you could get a mass audience for this stuff. There was a mass audience for outsider literature because the mainstream literary people are not doing shit. And then Fluland closed down. Everyone knows that story. Soft Cartel kind of rose in its place, but then Soft Cartel got converged. I was friends with. I became friends with Glon, who was affiliated with Soft Cartel around that time, and around Christmas, a friend of mine emailed me a memoir he'd written called Letters from a Heartbroken Pervert, sort of like this weird Bukowski-esque examination of sex and love in modern America. And he wanted me to publish it because he didn't want to have a public profile. He trusted me. He knew my marketing skills. And I was thinking to myself, why don't I build a publisher around this and use it as a flagship product? It's because it's really good. And then I thought, well, a publisher is a big initiative. We're going to need to drum up some attention first and build a name. So we'll start a literary magazine. And I picked the name Terra House because I was living in Budapest at the time. And the Terra House, House of Terrors, was a major tourist attraction near where I lived. It's a famous building in Budapest, and it's also snappy. It just rolls off the tongue. Terra House magazine, sounds really good. So I wanted to form this publisher and form this website based around literary works based purely on merit. Okay, if it's entertaining, no identity politics, no politics in general. Just if your story is entertaining, if you write well, we're going to promote your work. and we launched about a year ago, and like I said, the response from everyone has just been overwhelming. I have to thank a lot to Glon. He did a lot of absolute shilling in the beginning, and he's at least 35% responsible for the site's success. But the fact that so many people have sent in such great work and people read the work, we've got big names like we've had people like James Newlick, Logo Daedalus, Jay Dyer, Sean Kilpatrick have written for the site. It's really humbling.
Do you speak to Sam Pink?
Not in a while.
Oh, he's an interesting guy. He follows me. He likes a surprising number of my tweets, even though I don't think that we have a lot politically in common. I wouldn't assume, but he seems like an interesting guy.
Yeah, I've got Hurt Others on my reading list. I haven't been able to look at it, but yeah, I'm mutuals with Sam Pink. But yeah, it's we Terra House has went into controversy because of my background, but it's amusingly backfired because back in October, the hashtag Saferlit people decided to go after us because ooh, Matt Forney's evil. He's been cited by the SBLC. Don't contribute to his website, which inadvertently made us look cool and resulted in a flood of submissions to the sites. So thanks guys.
The SBLC is really good at signal boost, and they really help out with that.
Definitely, yeah. No one wants to contribute to a website that's been deemed dangerous and whatnot. That totally isn't appealing to the writing mind.
Yeah.
Matt Forney, I mean, I think the Terra House, you're back. Matt Forney has never gone anywhere. I mean, I'm enjoying it.
I'm glad you do. I mean, it's been a major part of my. It's been someone actually said on Twitter, is Matt Forney creating Terra House was a really good move for his public reputation, and it's well, this is kind of what I've wanted to do my entire life. I've been a public writer in some form or another since 2009. I never wanted to be some blogger or some self-improvement onanist or doing politics and stuff. I wanted to be a novelist. I grew up reading the likes of Charles Bukowski and Hunter Thompson and listening to Sonic Youth, and I wanted to be a creator. I just didn't. I lacked the self-confidence to do it when I was younger, and I also thought that it would never sell. I would have to do the stuff to pay the bills. But the fact that everyone has embraced Terra House, sent in their work, and I've been able to actually work on creative work of my own recently. I've actually been working on a poem that will probably be out soon, as well as a novel. And of course, we've got Terra House Press on the way with many great manuscripts coming in to publish there. It's really humbling. It's a fulfillment of what I've wanted to do my entire life, and I'm happy that everyone has kind of joined me on this journey. I'm happy that people have entrusted me with their work. It's really a beautiful thing to behold.
Yeah, I gotta thank you for that too. It's nice to get people writing and doing stuff. Because I think that's the main thing, is that you don't actually need a lot of people to kind of change the culture. Is that people overestimate how many people are actually needed. Is they think of in terms of we're going to go out and march. We're going to have a march. You really only need a few authors that can articulate an actually intelligent version of people's beliefs. And
you need a few authors, you need a few point men to kind of promote things, which is I think one of my other talents. I mean, I'm obviously not the most famous person or the most photogenic person, but I know how to promote people and get their work out into the public consciousness. And a lot of writers, the benefit of what Terra House is, a lot of writers just want to write. Okay, they don't want to concern themselves with constant self-promotion and whatnot, and I can help them do that. You go to Terra House, you go to the soon Terra House Press, we'll be able to get your book, your short story or whatever it is, out to a much larger audience, and you can just focus on that. That was a big advantage of pre-internet publishing. I can see you have point men, you have entities that are capable of broadcasting people's work out to a much larger audience than those individual authors can reach on their own. And I view a big problem as far as the internet, at least up until recently, was the lack of collaboration. People need to kind of, I mean, part of it is because like there's just a ton of people who can't be trusted, but in general, you need to come together and work together to achieve great things. And I think, and I hope Terra House will be a big part of that in the future, at least in the culture realm. Because as a certain wise man once said, politics is downstream from culture. You got to affect the culture if you want to affect lasting change. And I'm hoping I'll be able to be at least a small part of that.
You're a little gardener.
Yeah. We're trimming the garden. We're creating a beautiful garden. With the flowers, the daffodils, the perennials, and then we got the tomatoes and the cucumbers over there.
That's really admirable. I think we're doing something similar with Autistic Mercury or TekWars.com.
This is the TekWars official podcast.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with Autistic Mercury.
It's
this
also
is the TekWars podcast.
I mean, I would like them to bring the TekWars franchise back. I like the TV show, and I like the video game. Have you played TekWars, the video game, Matt?
To my eternal shame, I have not.
That's unfortunate. That's a real classic. So we're really going to get into everything TekWars 100% of the time, all TekWars related content. But I would also like to focus a bit on things like sliders, things of that nature. So we're really going to get into that.
Imagine I do some bits on Stargate Atlantis too,
Yeah, we need to do that. I mean, I want to bring on, we're going to have Mike Cernovich on this podcast, and we're going to talk to him seriously about sliders.
We're going to call
it I know he's a big fan of sliders.
Is he? Do you know that? Are you fooling with me, Matt?
No, I mean I might exaggerate it a bit, but I don't fool with anyone. So
that's I'm going to be disappointed if I find out that isn't true, because I have to say, Mike Cernovich is a sliders super fan. That's blowing my mind right now.
Oh, trust me, he's got a bunch of interests that will totally turn your world upside down.
Okay, Matt. Well, I enjoyed talking to you. We've gone up about 50 minutes or so why don't we call it quits there?
Thank you for the conversation, Matt. It was very nice to meet you.
No problem, guys. And since I was talking about Terra House, it's I should tell everyone to go to the website, which would be terrahousemag.com. That's Terror.
Okay. TerraHouseMag.com.
And of course, twitter.com/TerrorHouseMag.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thanks for talking to us, Matt. And I really enjoy Terra House, and I would recommend everyone go and check it out.
No problem, man. Thank you for having me on.